The spread of Ebola in Dallas puts a spotlight on how the government handles a crisis. In a CBS News poll out this morning, just 26% of Americans think the country is on the right track. 65% think it is on the wrong track. Meanwhile, 37% rated the CDC's job performance as excellent or good. 60% said the CDC was doing a fair or poor job. That poll is a shock for an agency that has a strong reputation. CBS News political director John Dickerson is with us. So is Frank Lutz, a CBS News contributor and a Republican strategist. Welcome.
Thank you. Morning, Charlie.
So what do we have when we see public institutions suffering a crisis of confidence and institutions that we depend on are not believable?
Well, it explains partially what we're going through in this election cycle when you see people have such a sense of anxiety. We knew that people didn't trust politicians. But if they didn't trust politicians, they had guardrails they could grab, and that was the institutions, whether it was government institutions or churches or the local police. Well, now they reach for that guardrail, and it isn't there for them. And we also see things like faith in the American dream, an old idea where if things fell away, you could still believe that the next generation would be better. We've seen a drop in the way people feel about the American dream. So people are reaching out for those guardrails, and they aren't there, and that creates a sense of anxiety, and that kind of feeds on itself.
So, Frank, what do they have to do to regain that confidence?
The problem is that the institutions that have the greatest impact on us, the CDC, the FDA, the EPA, those that are responsible for our health and safety are the ones that have had the biggest collapse. In fact, in some cases, it's 20, 30-point drop in just the last 15, 18 months. So that there's not much that politicians can do. There's not much that business leaders can do. And even the media has gone through a collapse in confidence. So the people who report the information about whether we should trust politicians, we don't even trust the people who report that trust.
I think one group, that the FBI comes out okay among all things, and that was not true in the early 90s. I think the answer here is if you're an institution, stay out of the news. The FBI has been relatively out of the news. Yeah. Once you get in the news like the CDC, you're on the way to the bottom.
But the military has a high rating.
And always has. Up in the 70s, that's about the last institution.
What's interesting is that the highest level of trust and confidence in government came during the Reagan administration, which was the most anti-government. And the lowest level of trust is right now, and one could argue that this president has been trying to preach trust, or at least involvement of government, to help people. So there's another message there. The less the government does, the better able government is to do it well.
John, we've seen confidence in Congress. I guess it's now a paltry 9%. It's nothing new that people are fed up with Congress. But how do you think it affects these midterm elections that are coming up?
I think people are disappointed with Congress because when it's not an election year, they look to Washington for some sort of either solution or some sense of competency, and they get a continual dose of incompetence. Then you go to the elections and you look at the conversation as it's taking place in political commercials, in debates, and what happens is the way the structure of our campaigns are run now, where things are targeted to narrow groups that are going to turn out, the conversation turns out to be about nothing that actually affects people in their daily lives. And so it reaffirms what people think about Congress normally, which is these people are up here having a heated debate about something that doesn't matter to me at all.
Like a fan.
The fan is an acute moment of stupidity, but look at the just day-to-day conversation in which people are arguing over a tiny little plot of ground over here when people say my life is this huge field of unanswered questions that nobody's addressing.
When you talk about unanswered questions, you can't help but talk about Ebola. How does Ebola specifically affect the midterm elections?
Well, I think the way Republicans would like it to affect the midterm elections is they've been trying to paint a picture of general incompetence around this president and the Democratic Party. And they've seized on whatever is in the headlines of the moment. And in the way we all cover things, and I say we, I mean the larger media, everything gets to kind of 10 on the scale of 1 to 10 of freaking out. And so when things are constantly at 10, all the opposition party has to do is just point to the number 10 and say, be nervous, be scared, and that turns out whoever is not in power.
And this is 10 right here. So everyone who's walking to work today in New York, and this is one of the most sold newspapers across the country, this is what they see. Whoops. So when we don't have faith in the scientific community, when we don't have faith in the health care community, what can we have faith in? I think that this is going to hurt incumbents, but not just on the national level. Take a look at the governor's races across the country. There are a number of incumbents from both political parties that look like they're going to go down. The highest number of incumbents beaten as governors is 5 in 1994.
So are we going to go ahead? No, not
Oh, I was just going to say, so rather than a Republican wave this year, you think it may be more of like an anti-incumbent wave?
Exactly, and it's a way to send a message to the elites that you have not only let us down, you've truly failed us, and we want to punish you because you have punished us.
This is an incredibly cynical, sad conversation we're having. When you go out and talk to people, there is still a great deal of hope in the country, and that's where why these numbers are so low, is that people still are looking for solutions to the people who are giving the speeches on the stage. They haven't completely written them off, although in a sense they have, but they are still in desperate hope that somebody's going to arrive and give them an answer.
They want the answer.